They laughed at his outdated uniform and tucked him behind the speakers until a Navy chopper interrupted the reunion and an admiral walked straight toward him. This is a quiet veteran story of betrayal, resilience, and unexpected honor. Sometimes dignity doesn't raise its voice, it lands in full salute. They sat me next to the portable toilets, right under a speaker blaring the wrong anthem. Name's Curtis Delane, 54 ex-systems officer. The collar of my old uniform still held the scent of mothballs and stale coffee. Funny how a cracked watch in your pocket can tick louder than a whole parade. Ever been honored only after they forgot you, they placed me near the portable toilets next to the AV cables and the backup speaker that no one ever fixed properly. The folding chair beneath me gave a half-hearted squeak every time I shifted. I adjusted my collar for the third time. Too stiff, too ceremonial for this breeze and this kind of sunlight. But I wore it anyway. For me. Did they let the IT guy dress up for nostalgia? A voice chuckled, just loud enough to bounce around the row behind me. I didn't turn. The question wasn't meant to be answered. I scanned the field ahead, rows of cheap plastic flags flapping from makeshift poles, a wide concrete podium with more microphones than speakers. The parade hadn't started yet, but the crowd had already formed cliques. Familiar uniforms, same old handshakes. I could still hear the way Von Mercer laughed crisp performative. That man had a laugh made for recruiting videos. He stood across the lawn in his custom-fit blazer, arms crossed like a commander without command, flanked by younger officers all grinning like they'd just won something. I didn't recognize most of them, which meant they certainly didn't recognize me. Good. The smell of kettle corn and diesel generators mingled in the air. I shifted again. A drop of sweat traced down my back, slow and unapologetic. I sipped from the plastic bottle tucked under my chair, lukewarm, the cap cracked a faint leak at the rim. Probably from the fall it took when I was loading it into Marla's trunk this morning. She had insisted I go. I hadn't planned to, not really. But then she left a note on the dashboard beside my gloves. It's not about them. It's about you. She always knew how to nudge gently where it mattered. A familiar voice, maybe from my academy days, snorted somewhere to my left. Still clinging to old badges, huh? Again, not directed at anyone in particular, just lobbed into the air like a paper airplane that didn't care where it landed. The badge on my chest, dull from years of quiet polishing, didn't flinch. Neither did I. I slipped my hand into my inner pocket. The watch was still there, small, brass, weighty in the way memories tend to be. My father had worn it every Sunday when he stood beside the organ at St. Elmo's. He'd given it to me the day I enlisted. Told me to keep time like I kept my words, steady, silent, unshakable. I glanced at the tiny crack on its face. Barely noticeable. Still worked. A shadow passed over. The crowd instinctively looked up. I followed. Far above, the silver glint of a helicopter caught the afternoon sun, banking with precision, its rumble not part of the official program. That much I knew. The brochure didn't mention a flyover, and there were no ceremonial flyovers for old systems engineers. Vaughn squinted skyward, his grin fading just enough to show a crack. The younger officers turned hands, shielding eyes. I remained seated, both feet flat on the gravel heart, beating a little faster, but face unmoved. Someone behind me muttered, "Who called that in?" No one answered. The thump grew louder. Trees at the edge of the field swayed in agreement. Dust lifted. Flags trembled. I adjusted my cap with 2 fingers, slow and deliberate, then folded my hands across my lap. The watch ticked beneath the fabric, still on time. Long before the snubs and the backhanded jokes, I worked in a room where the lights always buzzed slightly off tempo, and the floor hummed with static from aging network racks. We called it the crypt basement, level 2 flights below the main briefing deck at Norfolk Command Ops. It wasn't on the official tour, and even the brass didn't linger unless a printer caught fire. I loved it down there. The vents blew too hard in winter, too cold in summer, and everything smelled faintly of burnt plastic, old duct tape, and cup ramen, the kind of place you worked to solve things, not to be seen solving them. It was where I first met Chief Randall Hoyt. He didn't enter rooms. He just materialized already mid-thought, chewing a cinnamon toothpick and scowling like someone had just fed him a budget spreadsheet. "You logged the ghost ping on Drill Alpha last week," he asked one morning. No greeting. I nodded, still typing. "Redundant subloop in the East Sea branch. Already patched." 2 minutes ago." Hoyt squinted at the screen. "Did you tell command?" I shook my head. "Not unless it fails." It didn't. He nodded once, chewed harder. "Keep it that way. That was our rhythm." Quiet recognition. No applause, just another task. One Thursday mid-rotation, I noticed something odd in the new simulation routing logic in a drill mimicking a foreign electronic jamming scenario. We'd layered in complexity, but the model rerouted through an exposed port that hadn't been secured since a previous build. Ronnie, the younger tech across from me, was focused on his side project, debugging a VR recon drone model. "Ron," I said. "Pause for a sec. We've got a shadow reroute." He leaned over. "Huh. Think it'll collapse the test. If it doesn't, it'll skew results. Either way, bad." He whistled low. "You telling Brass I already had a plan?" "No. I'm rerouting it now." I keyed into the simulation shell and manually patched a logic redirect through a sandboxed node. It wasn't elegant, but it was clean. The drill continued. No alarms. Command never noticed. The test ran flawlessly. In the briefing that followed, the room upstairs broke into applause. Outstanding results, the captain beamed. Minimal signal leakage. Secure protocols in all lanes. Everyone involved, well done. I stood in the back corner, still smelling like server grease, arms crossed, watching my code hold up a simulation no one realized had nearly failed. Ronnie elbowed me lightly. "Guess you don't get a line in the after-action report." I didn't respond. Later that evening, back in the crypt, Hoyt stopped by my desk. He didn't speak, just dropped a sticky note on my keyboard and walked out. Yellow curling at the edges. His handwriting, "Your silence just saved a fleet." I never threw it away. The note lived tucked between the final pages of an outdated protocol binder. Volume 2 of Disaster Redundancies, 2012 edition. Right where no one would ever check. Weeks later, Hoyt called me into the cable room, a side closet barely large enough for 2 people to stand. I thought I'd done something wrong. He didn't sit, just leaned on the fuse box. "You want to last down here, Delane?" he asked. "I do, sir." "Then listen close." I did. Don't chase applause. That stuff fades. Fast. Build systems they can't ignore. They'll never say thank you, but they'll keep using it. He slapped the fuse box once and left. It stuck with me. Maybe too well. Back in the present, the reunion field hummed with conversation that didn't need me. The helicopter was still descending. My pulse had evened out, but my fingers traced the rim of my jacket pocket. I pulled the watch halfway out. Tick, tick, tick. I watched it for a second longer than necessary, then slid it back inside. Still working, still ignored. Just like me. They wanted flash. I gave them function. Vaughn gave them flair and failures. The hallways of the simulation wing echoed like they were trying to forget us. Smooth tile fluorescent lights that hummed in uneven rhythm, and doors with nameplates that seemed to slide lower on the pecking order each week. Project Horizon was supposed to be a revolution in fleet-level simulation architecture. Instead, it was becoming a press release factory. I had just wrapped Sentinel V1, a dynamic firewall simulation engine built for worst-case scenarios, signal overlaps, unexpected reroutes, bad actors embedded in multi-node drills. It worked. Quietly, efficiently, no sparkles. But it held. That morning I walked into the glass-walled conference room with my backup drive, a thermal coffee mug, and 6 printed slides, each one dense, ugly, and honest. Vaughn Mercer leaned on the far wall in a navy blazer, sleeves pushed up, no ID badge in sight. "Delane," he grinned, "those slides'll put people in comas. Let me walk 'em through. I'll handle the room, you handle the code." I blinked. "You've read it?" He winked. "Enough to make 'em believe it works." That was the first fracture. I handed him the deck, but tucked the original printout into my folder. Something about the way he adjusted his cufflinks made my fingers twitch. The test began mid-morning. 6 officers logged in remotely. Vaughn stood at the whiteboard drawing loops and circles with overconfident arrows. I sat near the console, sipping lukewarm coffee fingers, hovering above the keyboard, like a parent waiting to catch a child about to fall. At first it ran fine. But then Mercer's stripped-down model, the one with the gutted redundancy checks, faced Scenario J, the backdoor injection layer. It collapsed. The system didn't just fail, it lied. It faked security clearance and pretended normal behavior. In a real deployment, that breach would have sunk 2 vessels and spoofed a dozen signals. I looked across the room. Mercer didn't blink, just clicked to the next slide. Afterward, no one asked about the breach, not in the way that mattered. Commander Grant skimmed the failure report, frowning just enough to register emotion. Simulation failure stemmed from internal logic flaw, he said. Recommendations: roll back Sentinel to baseline and reallocate team focus. My name wasn't on the report. Neither was the Sentinel V1 tag. I stayed seated while the others filed out. The printer behind me began to groan, slow, mechanical, like it hated the truth it was being fed. I had sent the original version of my architecture to print, just in case someone asked. No one did. Mercer approached Cologne ahead of him, musky, sweet, overconfident. "Tough break, boss." He clapped me on the back like we were old teammates who'd lost a game. "Learning curve, right?" My shoulder stiffened under his palm, but I didn't move. "Don't beat yourself up," he added, adjusting his gloves. "They like drama. Clean failure is better than boring success." I turned my head just slightly. Clean failure still gets people hurt. He smiled with his eyes. "Not in simulations." He walked out whistling a tune I couldn't place. Something swingy, as if lives hadn't just been lost on screen. Back at my desk, I opened the architecture folder. The old version, redundancy, heavy, slow starting, but real, glowed on the screen like a relic. I printed it again, this time slower, making sure each line was visible. I folded the pages neatly, slid them into a manila envelope, and wrote in block letters, CTD AU. I sealed the flap with a strip of aging tape from the back drawer, the kind that curled too soon. My hand trembled slightly. I wasn't sure if it was anger or recognition, or maybe just the caffeine. Outside, the day hadn't changed. Same dull clouds, same breeze pretending it was fall. Inside, though, something had tilted. It would never go back. A fall doesn't always begin with a misstep or a shove. Sometimes it begins with a silence so dense it rattles more than sound. That winter evening, the only sound was the tick of the gas heater in my study, and then the soft, irrevocable thud of a pocket watch hitting the tile floor. I hadn't thrown it. I'm not that kind of man. It slipped from my fingers when I unfolded the latest memo from command. Subject System Transfer Authorization. We commend Lieutenant Von Mercer's foresight and initiative in realigning simulation protocols ahead of threat modeling forecasts. My name wasn't there, not even in the CC list. My system access had been suspended that morning. Administrative review, they called it. All familiar phrases. Their vagueness was efficient like a scalpel that never left a visible scar. The study was half lit. Outside the curtained window, the streetlight flickered weakly against a sleet-streaked sky. The dog Grigsby, aging and blind in one eye, snored near the radiator. The room smelled faintly of old coffee and whatever Marla had reheated for dinner. I sat before the computer, the resignation letter already open on the screen. 4 lines plain. It ended with "Regards, Curtis." The cursor blinked under my name like a pulse I couldn't control. It synced almost hypnotically with the ticking of the heater. I took a sip from the mug on my right. The coffee was cold, the rim stained. A faint ring had formed on the printed letterhead I'd been too proud to use last year. My thumb brushed over the crest Department of Naval Cyberstructure and left a smear I didn't bother wiping away. The watch lay face down on the floor, the fall short, but unkind. When I picked it up, the glass had cracked diagonally, corner to center. It still ticked. Somehow, that made it worse. Marla entered quietly. She always knew how to move when I couldn't. She wore a sweatshirt from Clem's old-school sleeves pushed up like she meant to fix something. She didn't ask what happened, just looked at the screen, then at the watch in my hand. "You sending that?" she asked. I drafted it. She nodded once, then sat on the edge of the desk, hands in her lap. "Do you remember?" she said softly the weekend we bought that desk lamp. "You insisted on one with the green shade. Said it looked like a thinking man's lamp." I said nothing. "You're still that man." I didn't argue, not because I agreed, because I didn't trust my voice. There was a soft knock. Clem peeked in, wrapped in a blanket, hair tied messily, eyes still swollen from sleep. "Dad." I cleared my throat. "Yeah, Bug." She walked in, noticed the cracked watch on the desk, then the blinking cursor. "You didn't raise me to quit over cowards," she said. Just that. No drama, no accusation. And just like that, something snapped back in place. Not rage, not pride, something quieter. A shape. I deleted the email. The sound of the key press was small, final, and oddly clean. Then I stood, walked to the corner where the old whiteboard leaned against the wall. I wiped off dust that had settled like resignation, clicked a dry erase marker into readiness. The cap was cracked like the watch. Everything aging but still functional. Lines formed. Boxes. A flow. Not revenge. Not even redemption. Just integrity restored from scratch. I heard Marla whisper something to Clem as they left the room. Probably about tea. or space heaters, or leaving a man room to breathe. I turned back to the drawer on my right, the one I hadn't opened since the last system reset. It creaked. Inside, wrapped in bubble paper and doubt, was a small encrypted drive. Label auth V2 personal. Do not copy. My hand hovered over it for a second. Then I took it out, placed it next to the cracked watch. The heater clicked again. Grigsby stirred. I uncapped another marker. Still working. Still mine. Sometimes you don't break the chain of command. You just build around it quietly, deliberately, like rewiring a circuit with the power still on. It was a little after midnight spring of 2022. The rest of the house slept. I sat in my home office slippers, worn thin sweatshirt older than some of the systems I used to patch. The mug by my keyboard read, "Retired, not expired." I'd bought it half as a joke, half as a prayer. Outside, the neighborhood was silent. A dog barked 3 houses down, but it didn't echo. The streetlight flickered twice and gave up. I stared at the manila envelope marked CTD Auth, the letters fading from too much sunlight and second-guessing. I had revised the architecture 6 times, stripped the fluff, reinforced the data logic, added cascading kill switches Vaughn would have called paranoid. Maybe they were. But they worked. I didn't want applause. I wanted it to exist. Beside the envelope sat an old navy manual edges curled navy blue cover creased near the spine. A sticky note fluttered inside Hoyt's words, still faded but legible. Build systems they can't ignore. I ran my fingers over it once, then folded the envelope open. I slid in a drive labeled in black Sharpie Sentinel V2, encrypted. Then another simulation logs, personal machine. A handwritten cover page on real paper. If you're still looking for answers, they're already built. No signature, no rank. Just Curtis. I opened my laptop and hesitated. The cursor blinked inside a clean, unsecured email client. No military server. No encryption handshake. Just a contact line I hadn't used in years. Imogen. Ray.Navy.cyber.at.mil. Rear Admiral Ray had once spoken at an internal seminar on post-retirement architecture resilience. She had mentioned Sentinel, my original build, by name, even before it had been flagged as too slow. I remembered her phrasing exactly. Speed without integrity is a weapon pointed backward. I hit send. Then I waited. I made tea. Fell asleep on the couch with a heating pad on my neck. Woke up groggy and sore. And when I checked my inbox at 0611, the reply was already there. Subject Sentinel body report to my office. 00900. Alone. No signature. No header flourish. Just a location block I hadn't seen in over a decade. I shaved. Wore my quietest shirt. Told Marla I had a coffee meeting near base. She didn't question it. She just handed me a breakfast bar and said, "Don't let them drain you." The base hadn't changed much. Badge checks, outdated posters, that particular sterile smell of freshly painted steel trying to cover old coffee stains. I walked the south corridor alone past names I didn't recognize through a door that hadn't been open to me in 3 years. Admiral Imogen Ray was already seated. No aide, no notepad. She motioned for me to sit without looking up. A single folder lay between us, navy blue labeled in silver ink. Sentinel Tier 2 Review, restricted. She finally spoke. "You've read the latest audit?" I nodded. "You're right," she said. "But You're not untouchable. I met her gaze. Never asked to be. She leaned back slightly, fingers steepled. You want this system alive, then earn it under fire. No more basements, no more favors, no flags shielding you. I kept still. What kind of fire? She slid a small plastic card across the desk. It was matte black. No name. Just room 219. Not clearance, she said. Not even validation. Just a chance. Then what am I walking into? Testing. Actual scenarios. No filters. No editing. You'll get one assistant, no headlines. They'll watch everything. I nodded. She tilted her head. Why now I didn't answer immediately? Then I pulled the cracked watch from my pocket, placed it gently on the edge of the desk. Its second hand ticked faint but steady. Because if we keep building with mirrors and applause, I said the first real signal will bury us. She looked at the watch for a second, then back at me. Room 219, she repeated. You start tomorrow. Some teams aren't assigned. They're built line by line, word by word, silence by silence. Like good code, the best of them are elegant, resilient, and invisible when working right. Room 219 looked like every other forgotten wing of base-side innovation, beige walls, soft buzz of fluorescent tubes, rubber floor tiles patched like a hospital hallway. But inside it pulsed, the hum of a new team, the breath of something real. Elena Calder entered without knocking. No salute, no clipboard, a single spiral notebook in hand, on the cover in scratched silver ink. No heroes, just syntax. She didn't introduce herself, just sat at a terminal near the far wall, booted into a VM and began typing. I didn't mind. The rest of the team, 3 analysts, 1 systems engineer, and an operator who still slept in his car, arrived slowly. Ray had kept her promise, no headlines, no parade, but the tools were there, and so was the expectation. I renamed the build. Sentinel had baggage. Aura felt right. A firewall, yes, but layered with subtlety. Something that sensed attacks rather than just deflected them. Elena skimmed the initialization sequence and immediately frowned. This async loop, she asked. You're trusting timestamps from shared memory. I raised an eyebrow. They held in prior sims. She shrugged. So did the Titanic's rivets. I liked her instantly. Rewrite it, I said. She did. In under 4 hours, the sandbox ran 12% faster. Latency dropped by 6 mems. More importantly, the false positive rate halved. No one clapped. No one paused to admire. They just kept working. We didn't talk much. Lunches were staggered and quiet. Whiteboards were filled with hand-sketched routing logic and error log hieroglyphics. One corner of the board bore a single sticky note in Elena's handwriting. Not bad for an old guy. I left it there. The test came on a Tuesday. No announcement. Just an unexpected scenario dump, a live breach model used to stress test new threat environments. The kind of thing Vaughn once flubbed for drama points. Aura didn't blink. Under 20 seconds from signal entry to containment, trace, and patch. The log screen glowed green. No crash, no data loss, no spurious ping to command fallback. We all sat for a second too long, like waiting for a second shoe that never dropped. Then someone, probably Ruiz, murmured, "That's real right." Elena didn't answer. She just typed one last line and hit enter. "Firewall with a soul," she whispered. I didn't say anything, just leaned back and let the moment breathe. When the room emptied for the night, I stayed behind. not out of nostalgia, just to breathe in the aftertaste of something earned. I began shutting off the monitors when I noticed the velvet pouch on my desk. No note, just soft cloth and weight. Inside the watch, my father's. The crack was gone. The glass was smooth again. It ticked softly, confidently. I looked out the narrow window. Somewhere far beyond the trees and waves, Vaughn was probably sitting in a glass office planning his next pitch. But this room, this beat, this team, they were mine. I held the watch to my ear, still ticking. Again. I didn't want a podium. Never did. I wanted the system to live, not as an artifact of some glorious legacy, but as something functional, resilient, alive. No spotlights, no inspirational memos, just uptime. It was early October 2023. Leaves slicked the sidewalk like fallen epaulets. Norfolk's air was heavy with brine and cinnamon. I sat at a booth in Deckside Diner, the kind of place where the mugs were stained but warm, and the jazz played just loud enough to excuse silence. Across from me, Elena stirred her coffee without looking up. Her laptop was open, code minimized. Her fingers were red from the chill, but her eyes sharp. "I put in your name," I said. She blinked. "For team lead. Sentinel's yours if you want it." She didn't react right away. Just took a sip. The waitress came by and refilled my mug without asking. "You sure?" Elena finally asked. "Systems need stewards, not founders," I said. "You've got the right instincts." She tilted her head. "And the right level of stubborn?" "That too." I reached into my coat and pulled out the letter. The envelope was thick cream-colored with the Navy's insignia embossed at the corner. The ink smelled faintly of copper. Inside, Chief Hoyt's handwriting curved neatly like it had 40 years ago, but the strokes were slower now. "Curtis, you were never alone. Some of us were listening. We just speak quieter. Glad you stayed in the room. No date, no rank, just Hoyt at the end in ink that had bled a little at the loop." I let Elena read it. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Over meatloaf and a shared slice of peach pie, she finally leaned back and said, "You know why I signed up?" I shook my head. "They used to tell this story," she said. "About a guy who got pushed out whose firewall got rewritten by a glory hound, but he kept coding anyway. No drama, just resolve. Ghost story." She smiled. "Blueprint." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I looked out the window. A boy ran by with a kite trailing behind the wind, lifting it higher than it had any business flying. "You going to the reunion next year?" she asked. I hesitated. "Maybe. Not out of protest. No," I said. "Presents." She nodded. We fell into a comfortable pause, the kind you only get after finishing something neither of you fully owned. When I got home, Clem was making soup. She had her hair up, an apron around her middle, and her phone lighting the counter like a lantern. She handed me the mail without turning. Among the circulars and donation asks, I noticed a new text had popped up on my own phone. "Clem, 2:43 p.m. You should wear the uniform. Not for them, for you." There were no banners, no red carpet, no music swelling at the right cue. Just the sound of boots on gravel, the snap of folding chairs, and the deep-throated churn of a helicopter rotor slicing the autumn air. The Veterans Parade hadn't changed much, still the same brittle folding chairs sinking slightly into damp grass. Still the faded flags stitched by hands older than most of the crowd. Still the smell of kettle corn diesel and pride held together by muscle memory. They seated me near the back again, not quite by the portable toilets this time, but close enough to smell the soap packets taped to the inside wall. Same AV tent, different volunteers. I didn't mind. The lapel pin I wore was the same one Mercer once joked about. The ribbon bar from the Operation Helix watch. Back then, it barely got a glance. Now it caught the glint of morning sun sharper than I remembered. In my pocket, the watch ticked. I kept my breathing, slow gaze steady. No need to scan the crowd. Elena was somewhere near the press line. Clem had promised to watch from the tree line where the canopies gave shade. Neither of them needed to be near. That was the thing about presence. It didn't demand attention. It shaped the room quietly, like heat rising through floorboards. Then came the shift in air pressure. First the murmur, then the sudden hush, then the deep, low rumble, the kind you feel in your molars. The chopper didn't circle. It descended smooth, direct, unapologetic. The tail bore no ceremonial flags, just a matte black finish that whispered protocol. I stood without knowing why. The landing gears pressed into the lawn with finality. The rotors whined into deceleration. Doors opened. Rear Admiral Imogene Ray stepped out first. No brass band. No announcement. Just her boots finding earth like punctuation marks. Two aides followed sharp suits, quieter expressions. She walked right past the microphone stand, past the podium with the program notes fluttering in the wind, past the row of flag bearers who instinctively straightened, straight to me. She stopped exactly 3 feet away, raised her right hand to her brow. A deliberate salute, firm, not rushed. "Mr. Delane," she said on behalf of the fleet. "We remember." Silence held. Then someone in the crowd murmured. Then another stood. Then chairs creaked, jackets rustled, shoes scuffed soil, and one by one they rose. The parade announcer didn't interrupt. He just lowered his mic. Elena, from her position near the security booth, didn't smile. She just nodded. Mercer, of all people, was already standing. No grin, no gestures. Just eyes steady on mine, hands clasped in front of him. I didn't return the salute. I simply inclined my head. The Admiral lowered her arm, gave me a half-inch of smile, turned and left. The rotors started again. People began sitting. Some wiped their eyes. Some just looked confused, like the moment had pulled something out of them they hadn't named in years. The sun slipped behind a thin cloud. A boy dropped his flag. A woman pressed her hand to her husband's back. No one said justice. No one shouted my name. And that was the beauty of it. Curtis Delane had not been vindicated. He had simply been remembered. I sat again. The chair creaked same as before. My fingers found the watch in my pocket. Still ticking. The last of the chairs had folded. The field was quieter now, except for the soft ticking in my pocket, steady, certain. The same watch once cracked now kept better time than I ever did. Turns out, not every recognition needs a microphone. Sometimes just standing still long enough lets the world catch up. We don't always win by making noise. Sometimes we win by not leaving the room. If you've ever felt forgotten, or quietly kept something good alive, maybe that was your moment of legacy beginning. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise? Share your story below, or if this resonated, feel free to subscribe and stay for the next tale.